This is the Franchise QB Podcast, where we empower entrepreneurs to win big in franchising. We huddle up weekly to educate our audience about the most successful small business model ever created, franchising.
Welcome to the Franchise QB Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Halpern, a 20-year industry veteran and entrepreneur. My mission is for listeners to achieve their American dreams of creating wealth and independence through franchise ownership. Every week, we speak with franchisees, franchisors, or vendors that support the industry. Thank you for joining us, and let's get started. Joining us in the huddle today is Tamara Galinsky, founder and brand president of JETSET Pilates. Welcome to the show, Tamara.
Thank you, Mike. I'm super excited to be on, I would say, my second or third podcast ever. So thrilled and nervous.
Don't be nervous. Well, I would love to share your background with the audience. It's very interesting. Your path to fitness and entrepreneurship started back in Russia. So tell us your journey from when you were younger, and we'll talk a little bit more about JETSET as we get to today. But tell us your story.
Well, thank you again for the opportunity. Yeah, you probably hear a slight accent, like you got it. It is Russian. So I came to the States, actually to Stamford, Connecticut with my family in 1989. I was 15 years old, so I guess you can kind of figure out my age. Pilates keeps me young. And, I didn't speak a word of English. And, my family was super poor because we were Jewish. We were trying to get out of the country in a very short time. We were given 2 months, like $80 a person. I was on food stamps, and this is when I had kind of a transformative experience coming into high school in a nice, wealthy city and not really having anything, and where I've decided, I'm going to figure out my life pretty quickly, and I want to never be, poor again, but also I want to figure something out where I enjoy doing, where I'm making a great living. And I ended up getting into University of Pennsylvania, which is an Ivy League school.
I saw that. That's an important school for my family. I actually grew up in Bucks County, PA, just outside of Philadelphia, and my grandfather and my great uncle both went there.
That's so, what a coincidence. I love Philly, and I had a great time. And obviously it opened a lot of doors to kind of the industries that allowed me to make pretty high income pretty quickly, technology and technology sales. I worked for Reuters. Then I pivoted into commercial real estate. I paid off my school loans pretty quickly. So this was the path to making money, but it wasn't really keeping me happy or satisfied. And, I was a gym junkie. I've gone through all kinds of gyms, and that was before even the days of Pilates. And when I moved to London with my ex-husband now, this is where I discovered Pilates after giving birth to my first daughter. And I gained way too much weight. I was trying desperately to lose it. And this is when I discovered literally a tiny studio with like 4 reformers in Kensington where I lived. And it really shredded my body to something I've never even had before the baby. But it also gave me this ability to tune out. It was very meditative. So, women post-birth, they face, depression and all kinds of, postpartum issues. And I think this was not just physical, but it was also mental. And all the dots aligned. At that time, I was a partner at a commercial real estate firm. So I had a, very intense job. I ended up moving to Miami and started to look for Pilates studios. And you would think Miami is like the fitness capital of the world.
Right. Everything's there, right?
Everything. You would think that everything was there in 2009, but there was no Pilates experience the way I wanted it. So I kind of explored the coast all the way from Miami Beach to West Palm Beach. I couldn't find a studio that I wanted, which created kind of a vibe, experience, and community. And I pulled the trigger and I said, you know what, I'll try it on my own. I'll just do something literally a block away from where I lived. I found a great spot. And I remember all my friends said that I'm crazy, that the building we live in was a big building, luxurious building, had a huge gym. Please don't do it because nobody's going to come. And I didn't take their advice, and I did it anyway. So that's the first location that started. JETSET is not an overnight success. It started in 2010. And that's really what led me to do it, really kind of a need for myself without even thinking it was ever going to be where it is today.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love the story. And you mentioned reformer Pilates. So can you explain to me the difference between reformer Pilates and the other, I guess, traditional version?
Sure. So there's also traditional reformer Pilates. So Pilates was created more than 100 years ago by Joseph Pilates. And, these are these contortionate machines. He created them really for ballet dancers to stretch and prevent injury and strengthen at the same time. And then there's also mat Pilates, where you kind of put a mat like a yoga mat. But the unique thing about reformer Pilates and JETSET reformer Pilates is that the reformer, which is a piece of equipment, is based on springs, which is a spring load and a carriage. And it allows you to use your own body weight plus little spring helpers to do so many exercises. I mean, probably we could do about over 360 exercises. And that's really the big difference between putting a mat and using a reformer. But then there are different kind of reformers. And I think JETSET has one of the industry kind of best reformers right now in the space. So I think this is the biggest difference you would see between traditional mat and reformer Pilates.
Yeah, that's really cool. So that machine just opens up all these different opportunities to try new exercises and kind of mix up the routine and just make it really interesting for your guests.
Yeah, it's almost like you have a canvas, and then our instructors are trained to learn how to hold the brush and what paints to use at the beginning. And we give them building blocks, and probably 6 months after that, they become artists. I mean, they have trained how to create the beautifully choreographed routines based on our training. To our proprietary music, we have a DJ who puts our music together. So JETSET is not just a Pilates class. It does become like this really unique, cool experience and a community of people.
That's really neat. And yeah, it's just like really cool how the mind-body connection seems to really resonate with this type of Pilates and specifically in your brand. So let's talk a little bit about what makes JETSET unique and different from other franchises or other Pilates studios. I know you guys have your unique spin and vibe to it. So what kind of stands out as the differentiation for JETSET?
I think for me, coming new into the industry, into franchising, I think, and I'm not going to speak for all the brands, but I have known people call me up and say, give me advice about franchising. And, the lawyer told me, put an FDD together. Here we are. What we've done, we have an incredible team behind franchising, and we actually spent 9 months. We funded the company, and we spent 9 full months with a group of full-time stakeholders in the company creating the systems before we sold a single franchise. So that's number one. And when you go from a strong base, you only get to a stronger base. That's why since we start franchising in 2022, we're now close to 55 locations sold, right?
Wow, that's,
so I think,
congratulations. That's
thank you.
Epic growth.
I think we're pretty sold out in South Florida, and I see franchisors who bought several units, and before they even open one, they're buying 5 more because they're seeing other franchisees do so well. So I think the strong, I could take you through the systems, but I think all the franchisees have the same systems from onboarding to real estate and things like that. But ours were very heavy on front. The development of these systems was very heavy on front. The other interesting thing, and I always talked about that to the team, and it resonated with a franchisee who was talking to me. It was a husband and wife, and they were in a brand, meet the president, the final approval stage. And I asked the husband, I said, why are you buying into this brand? And he said to me, it's a family office. And he said, look, my wife loves the workout. She loves Pilates. I know nothing about your workout. I didn't even try it. But what I do know, I know about luxury brands, and you are a luxury brand. And I think the combination of being able to create merge the two, right? A strong brand and a strong unit economics and a great experience, I think that really does set us apart in the industry today. And we're filling that gap that was missing for so long, I think.
Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, good economics, something different and unique, and sounds like you're getting results for the members, which is really important. So let's talk a little bit about the labor model. So a franchisee invests, they build out their studio. How many people does it take to run this business?
So at any given point, so at the opening, we really love to have an instructor, a studio lead, somebody who sits at the front desk. And a studio lead for us is more than just checking clients, and they have all kinds of access to CRMs, follow-throughs, upsell, and a studio manager. So the model is simple. The studio manager doesn't have to be there all the time once the studio ramps up and opens. And at any given time, you want to have two people at the studio lead and an instructor. So I think operationally, it's a really simple model. I think for single studio, and I think as you grow into multi studios, you can hire managers that could definitely handle multi studios within a certain proximity, which is also great because you can use economies of scale.
Yeah. So is it hard for owners to find quality instructors? Is there licensing? Like, how does that all work?
I mean, excellent question. Top of mind for everybody. The nice thing about JETSET is that we're not looking for Pilates instructors. We have our own training academy. We are looking for people, two things, somebody who is passionate about fitness and personalities, and we mold them into JETSET instructors. So the rest is up to us. So we really do help franchisees find those people, find our avatars based on those criterias, and then we send them all through our JETSET Training Academy.
So passionate about fitness, they're outgoing, they're motivated. These make great instructors within your model.
Right.
Awesome. Very cool. You kind of touched very briefly on the systems. I know you guys kind of separate yourselves with great systems. You have a learning management system you call the Collective. You have an ordering platform that kind of aggregates multiple vendors to make it easy for owners to order whatever they need. You have a point of sale and booking platform called MindBody. Can you touch a little bit about some of the tech behind the scenes that kind of separates you guys from the other Pilates concepts?
Sure. So MindBody is they're kind of like the 800-pound gorilla in the booking industry. What we also have is a proprietary API and a front end to MindBody. So you can probably drain yourself in those reports, and you got to be kind of a computer geek to really get in there. So what we've done, we've been able to extract all the data points to create our own proprietary CRM system. So if a studio lead sits in the studio, that system talks to the API and could tell you whose packages are expiring, who are frequent users. It could tell you the whole mapping of where people are coming from, who are the first comers to the next class. And it's, the data mining becomes really user friendly to the point where that studio lead, that person who, doesn't want to get into the MindBody and learn all the tools of MindBody, can really easily deal with being able to upsell and create a better customer service experience, which is really, really important. And I think also from the construction and real estate for everybody is also pain points. We work with, a very good vendor right now called Red Sea. So our franchisees are required to use Red Sea to follow all our prototype and building guidelines to make sure the JETSETs are uniform. And I think that's really been extremely helpful for everybody who's been coming online since we started selling franchise and building them out.
And what's the expectation for a timeline? I mean, I know anything brick and mortar where you have to identify the perfect site, because location, you can take the right model, put it in the wrong spot, and you're in trouble. So how long does this time frame take from when a franchisee signs on the dotted line and they can expect the studio to be kind of operational? I know it depends, but what's a ballpark?
So, because we've really been at it for 2 years, we only have limited data points, and we've been on both spectrums. We have been able to secure a location literally in 2 weeks and be open in 6 because we got it off market, and Florida is a very tight market. And then there's another market that we couldn't find something for 7 months, and we just kept going. And until we didn't sign a lease, but eventually we did. So I think the spectrum there, I think the reason everybody says it depends on how good your broker is on the ground. How much they're uncovering the things that are not on the market, and also, how quickly you can sign the lease. So I think. So
is there anything you guys do? Like, let's say the lease is signed, and this is probably going to be 3 or 4 months until the studio's built out and ready for use. Is there anything we do to kind of generate revenue between that time, or is it more just let's get the pre-sales going so that when the studio launches, there's a ton of buzz, and out of the gate, we're in the black as quickly as possible?
Yeah. So far, our studios, the franchise location that's been open, the very first franchise location did so much in pre-sales, we weren't expecting it, and we weren't even ready with the amount of classes. We oversold. It's a good problem to have, but it was a problem because people couldn't get off. We end up having 10 classes on a list, and people still couldn't get into classes. And that was our first Fort Lauderdale location. Pre-sales is super important to us. We have a whole plug-in into our digital marketing agency, which actually is required to use by all the franchisees. We start out pre-sales 12 months before we open, tabling pre-sales. So the revenue that you're going to see in your bank is really from pre-selling or founding memberships and packages. And there's really nothing else. Right now, we're not a brand that sells, let's say, merch. You can buy JETSET Pilates merch, though I don't see that potentially being something we do in the future as the brand grows. We have a lot of demand, but this is something, our pre-sales have been stronger than expected. And that's really been.
Yeah, once the studio launches, tell us a little bit about the app that the kind of customers and the members are going to use. Well, it sounds like about 90% of the members use the app. What are some of the features that make it sticky and make people like to use it?
Well, what I do like, when I log into my app, it tells me I've taken 932 classes at JETSET.
Wow, you can, nice, leaderboard.
So that's really cool, but it allows you to toggle between different locations. Obviously, as we grow, we're going to have people who travel, toggle between location, easy bookings, wait lists and things like that. You could see your account balances, and it's very minimum and user-friendly. It's not overloaded with different markers. Is just really meant for people to book as often as possible and as easy as possible. And that sits again on top of that MindBody API. And also, as soon as the franchisee signs the franchise agreement, and even before they go out with whoever broker looking for space, another thing we do on the back end, we have a project management system, which also we've developed in-house. And it starts from literally, somebody who doesn't even know how to set up an LLC. It starts from point one and takes them through little micro steps. Of course, they can skip them, but if you don't know how to do it, it takes them from little steps and literally until they open. And then they're handed over to Taylor, who is amazing, and she's the head of franchise services. Okay. And then there's the pre-opening and post-opening.
Yeah, and I think that's smart because a lot of your owners are going to be first time to franchising and first time to Pilates in some cases, so they need to make sure that they're doing it the right way from the beginning, which will create less headaches for you, and obviously it'll be big value add for them. So right. what like taking a step back and looking at the market, like what's the current market size for Pilates and what are the projections into the future?
So for some reason everybody puts together Pilates and yoga when they do market research. I don't know why they've been doing that, but they talk about Pilates and yoga. But the Pilates, I know the increase in Pilates users from 2022 to 2023 has been 15%, which is a very high jump. The industry in 2023, Pilates and yoga, was 173 billion, and they're projecting that to double in 7 years. And I do strongly believe that most of that growth is going to be fueled by Pilates, because if you look at yoga, it's been around for a long time. There's a lot of studios. It's penetrated pretty heavy also now with men attending it. I think men is a big demographic that you're starting to see in Pilates classes. So I think, if you're thinking 7 years, the industry is going to double, there's tremendous opportunity to grow.
Very cool. Well, thanks for sharing that. So let's talk a little bit about revenue streams that a franchise owner can enjoy within the JETSET model. So what are the different ways? I mean, I know subscriptions have to be the number one, but what else is there?
Subscription. We do have some studios that offer private classes, though it's not many. If the space comes in where the opportunity presents itself, there's a space in the back. They put private reformers, but also our merch. Because we're a very sticky brand, we now actually recently hired somebody who is our head of merchandising. And I am, keenly aware that a lot of brands have not been able to really get the merch part. I think with JETSET, we're really heading on the way to elevate the merch experience and make like seasonal drops and really stock the studios to the point where they're going to see, right now they see probably 4 or 5% of revenue from merch. I'd love to get it to 10.
Yeah.
And like 4 or 5. Name.
Yeah. JETSET's like memorable. It's easy. Yeah. You're not going to forget it, and it's definitely one I think if done correctly could have that growth. So
yeah. It's cool and sexy.
Yeah. So let's talk about your team. You mentioned before, so you have, Bert, that is the CEO of the company, and he has a lot of experience. He brought a brand from Australia over to the States. I'd love to hear about your executive team and kind of,
Sure,
what it looks like today.
Yeah. So we have Bert. You mentioned Sarah Buey. She is in franchise development. And we actually made our team announcement probably like 2 weeks ago. Aaron, who spent 7 years in franchise development in Club Pilates. So that's really helpful for us. I mean, I really respect that specific brand of exponential fitness. They've really been able to standardize your traditional Pilates. So she brings a lot of know-how. The big part for her is training, because our product is our instructor. It's our class and instructors. So we have Joe, who heads our training, and she has 20 years of training other trainers in the industry. And her last job was at Beachbody, which is a huge digital media company in California. And then we have two girls who come from, I don't look at them as a competitor because they're really corporate and they're more kind of CrossFit type of thing, Salad Core. They were one of the original members of Salad Core, and they're our chief operating officer and chief strategy officer, Nat and Charlie. We have a head of franchise services, Taylor, who actually used to work for the corporate locations that I own. So she really learned all of the things on the ground, and now I've taken it to the franchisees, not just.
So she knows everything because she's been with you.
She knows what to do when electricity goes out. I mean, she knows everything. But she comes from very strong operations background, where she actually managed a $500 million portfolio for medical systems. So she's a very smart person. She just wanted to get out of the corporate world, and I got her at the right place at the right time. And then we have head of merchandising and marketing. So that's really our corporate team, which makes it complete. And then we're about to hire internal head of real estate and construction, because right now it's outsourced. But with 54 locations, I think we reached kind of the crossroads where we're going to start to bring more things in-house. And so the team is growing with, probably every 10 to 20 that we're about to open, we're going to start adding support verticals onto the head of departments.
Yeah, it sounds like you're keeping up with the growth and kind of have a real nice sized team for where you are in your development cycle. So that's really important to a lot of people that are contemplating this as an investment. So you mentioned a little bit about Taylor, the Blueprint program, which I think you touched on earlier. What type of services kind of come along with that for franchise owners?
So I'll tell you, I wish I had that program when I was opening the first JETSET. Because these are your best practices about hiring, training, retaining staff, looking at different markers as far as your monthly financials, attendance, how often your clients are visiting, NPS scores. I mean, it covers everything for creating very efficient franchise that really cares both about the client experience, but also about the bottom line. And it's constantly calibrated. And she's the one who holds at the beginning weekly meetings with all the owners, or sometimes owners slash managers, until they open, and they become biweekly, and then they become monthly. So she's the one who created this program from ground up. It's proprietary to JETSET, and it comes from both her experience running the corporate studios and also coming from very strong operational background, being on the back end of so many medical facilities and seeing how they operate. So I'm really, really impressed with that. And we've been actually using that and now putting it into the corporate studios and testing it, which is a great thing when you have corporately owned locations.
Okay. So now that you've been at it a while on the franchise side of the business, who is an ideal candidate for you? I mean, you mentioned the husband and wife before, but like looking at, and I'm sure there's a few different avatars you seek, but is there one that kind of stands out as a ideal franchise owner for JETSET?
Yeah, excellent question. I would love for people, first of all, to connect with the brand, because I think there's obviously a lot of fitness franchises out there in the country, and believe in our brand, believe in our growth. And I think an ideal candidate for us is either somebody who is looking to completely pivot their careers entirely, hopefully own multiple studios, and that could be any industry. And I've seen people come out of like HR, who is a Brooklyn location, from computer programming, or it's an owner operator who is really just a savvy business person who understands that this is a cash cow and wants to install a really good operating team and look to open multiple locations or develop a territory.
Nice. So how big are the territories for franchise owners? I know it's a little different when you have a brick and mortar studio where there's a radius around that store, but when someone buys the rights to kind of start developing the units, what do those territories look like?
So we spent a lot of time and put a lot of thought into these territories. And this is where Aaron has been super helpful, who came from Club Pilates, that, is sold out, to be sure we really don't cannibalize. Our biggest thing is to do right by our franchisees. We're not just selling these things like hotcakes. We want to make sure they're coherent with their neighbors. So the typical territory will be about 30,000 people, but in a certain income bracket that makes sense for JETSET Pilates. So we really, give a circle, and often it's a zip code or several zip codes, depending whether you're going in a vertical city or more kind of not as dense, suburban market.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay. So let's kind of revisit the growth. So how many franchise owners are currently operating, and how many territories are sold so far?
So we currently have 4 franchise owners completely open and operating. So there's downtown Miami, Coral Gables, Fort Lauderdale, and West Boca. And we have 2 more that are about to open in 2 months. So it's going to be 6. I think we now have 12 more leases signed, so they're in design and development. And when you say markets, I mean, we did kind of splatter all over the country, which I really like. We're going into Dallas, Houston, Austin, New York City, Brooklyn. We're in Raleigh, several units in San Diego, California, Boston. So we really are marking a lot of major cities, because we wanted to start with really kind of putting flagship studios in all the good markets. And that's how we see the cycle going from there.
Got it. Yeah, you mentioned a lot of markets that are very franchise friendly, densely populated, tons of growth. Those markets you mentioned, I hear quite frequently, especially with a lot of the home services franchises we deal with. So it sounds like you're planting your flag in the right spots.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the cost to get in. Obviously, there's a build out, there's furniture, fixtures, equipment, all that. In the item 7, what's our range to kind of get started with a single unit? And obviously there'll be additional capital deployed for multi-units.
So it's from $399,000 to $648,000.
Okay. And that difference is mostly going to be in the size of the footprint and how much work we have to do to improve the space, like put in bathrooms and put in this and that.
Yeah, size of the footprint and TI. Some markets are super TI friendly where their vacancy is higher. Some markets are not so TI friendly where the vacancy is low. So that's the range. But where the vacancy is low, it's very dense, and you also want to be there. So it's worth to pay a little bit extra.
Yeah. And your footprint range is, what's the low, what's the high for what we've seen so far?
So 1,580 is the lowest we want to take, because our model is really, you make revenue per reformer. Our minimum is 12, and we go all the way up to 18 reformers if we can in major cities. So we can go all the way up to 2,300 square feet.
Very cool. And I was looking at the item 19, really strong margins I saw, and this may be dated. This might have been last year.
Yeah, it's dated. You're going to see a much better margins. We have all the franchise locations that open so far, they are going to be breaking $1 million a year revenue mark. And these are the people who signed on 1 unit's already buying second, people who signed on 3 buying 5 more. So we're really seeing a validation amongst the initial franchisees who already open.
Yeah, and the FTD was showing over 35% EBITDA, which is really unique for a brick and mortar that's got an occupancy cost, and it has labor, and it has all the other, utility expenses. So that's a really, really solid margin.
Yeah, it's a solid margin.
Awesome. So you've shared a ton with us today. I'm really excited about the brand. It's really neat to see a great, unique, different concept come to market and blow up, and that's pretty exciting. Anything else that you want to share with us before we wrap up today, Tamara?
Yeah, we just did our Come Inside the Studio with Me video. It's absolutely brilliant. It's beautiful. It really showcases a typical franchise location. We're going to be releasing it, hopefully putting it onto our website soon. And, if anybody's interested to see it, to ping us and we'll share it with them. It'll give them a real sense of what it's like to be inside JETSET.
Yeah, that's really cool. I want to check it out. So
cool.
If anyone listening would like to connect with Tamara and her team to discuss JETSET Pilates, contact me at franchiseqb.com or on Twitter at QBFranchiseQB. I'll get you guys connected. Thank you, Tamara, so much for taking the time to get in the huddle and speak with us today about JETSET.
Love the huddle.
Take it easy.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Franchise QB podcast, where you're at the helm of your future as a franchise owner. If you enjoyed the content, please rate the show and recommend it to anyone that might be interested in franchising. Make sure to visit franchiseqb.com to subscribe to my newsletter and for an actionable playbook to go from walk-on to legend in your new business. Follow us on Twitter at QBFranchiseQB and join us every week for a new episode. See you next time.
Visit franchiseqb.com to take the next step of your journey towards wealth, independence, and franchise ownership. And remember, when working for the man gets old, you must do something bold. Thank you for listening.